Amelia's cheeks were flushed pink and her eyes danced. She took Clara's hands in hers. "Samuel spoke to father and mother last night," she blurted out. He wants to marry me." Amelia gave a half-gasp, half-laugh of disbelief, as if she herself could hardly believe it. Clara's stomach dropped even as she squeezed Amelia's hands back, trying to mirror her sister's smile. In a quiet village nestled between gentle hills and sprawling green fields, there lived two sisters named Amelia and Clara. Their home was a modest compound surrounded by a low cement wall that their father had built with his own hands. The houses in the village were simple cement structures with tin roofs that rattled softly whenever the wind blew. In the afternoons, children would play barefoot in the dusty lane, their laughter echoing off the concrete walls, while chickens scurried around pecking at seeds in the red earth. The sun was warm and golden over the village, casting long shadows of mango trees across courtyards where families gathered after the day's work. Amelia and Clara grew up in this close-knit community where everyone knew each other's names and stories. From the time they were little, the two sisters were as different as the morning and the night. Amelia, the elder by 2 years, was blessed with a kind of beauty that turned heads and softened hearts. She had large, gentle eyes that sparkled when she laughed, and her laughter was a melody the villagers loved to hear. Her hair, dark and wavy, framed a face that always seemed to be lit by an inner glow. Amelia was not only beautiful in appearance, she had a tender heart and a warm spirit. She would help the old women carry their baskets from the market and play with the toddlers to give tired mothers a rest. People in the village often said Amelia had been kissed by angels at birth, for she grew into a girl who was as good as she was beautiful. Clara, the younger sister, watched Amelia from the shadows of doorways and the corners of rooms. Where Amelia was sturdy and radiant, Clara was small-boned and delicate, with a face that was often pale. Clara had a quiet presence, like the soft glow of a single candle in a dark room. Some in the village whispered that Clara had been born too early or under an unlucky star because she was often sick as a child and lacked the robust energy that Amelia had. While Amelia ran freely in the fields, chasing grasshoppers and butterflies under the bright sky, Clara would sit on the steps of the veranda, coughing into her handkerchief or cradling a rag doll in her thin arms. It wasn't that Clara lacked beauty entirely. In truth, if one looked closely, one could see a subtle, fragile charm in her doe-like brown eyes and the gentle curve of her face. But standing next to Amelia, who was all bright smiles and confident grace, Clara always seemed to fade into the background. The villagers, in their well-meaning but often cruel bluntness, made their preference clear. "What a lovely child Amelia is," they would exclaim when Amelia accompanied her mother to the market, helping to balance the basket of vegetables on her head with effortless poise. The market women would pinch Amelia's cheeks and press a sweet into her hand, praising her manners or her pretty dress. Amelia would smile politely and thank them, then share the sweet with Clara on the walk home. Clara walked a step behind, clutching the edge of her mother's wrapper or the handle of the basket, trying to be as helpful as her sister, but often overlooked. Sometimes, as an afterthought, one of the market women would notice Clara and say, "And Clara, how are you, dear?" But by then, the attention had already passed. The momentary kindness did little to wash away the lingering feeling that Clara was invisible whenever Amelia was around. In the evenings, when the family sat outside in the compound to catch the cool breeze, neighbors would drop by to chat. They often praised Amelia, how well she did on her school test, how respectfully she spoke to elders, how nimble her feet were when she danced during the last festival. Clara would sit quietly on the bamboo mat, listening to these praises showered on her sister. She would pick at the fraying edges of the mat or trace patterns in the dust with her toe, pretending not to hear. If anyone noticed her silence, they might comment, Clara is the quiet one, isn't she? Or, she must be tired. Her mother would sometimes gently stroke Clara's back and say, "Our Clara is a gentle soul, a bit shy." Clara would offer a small, polite smile if anyone looked her way, but her heart would be heavy with a mix of emotions she couldn't fully understand or name yet. In truth, Clara loved Amelia. How could she not? Amelia was her big sister, the one who held her hand during thunderstorms when they were little, and told her stories to soothe her when she was ill. Amelia would tuck the mosquito net carefully around Clara's bed at night and bring cool cloths for her forehead when she had a fever. Amelia was always there, a comforting presence in Clara's fragile world. Clara remembered one night waking from a nightmare, trembling and whimpering in the dark. Amelia had climbed into bed with her, wrapping Clara in her arms and humming a lullaby until she fell asleep again. Amelia's warmth and kindness were rays of light in Clara's otherwise timid world. Yet, as the years passed and they grew from little girls into adolescents, Clara felt something new and unsettling coiling in her heart. It was small at first, like a tiny green snake flickering its tongue, hidden deep in the shadows of her thoughts. It often appeared after an evening of hearing Amelia praised by the neighbors, or after watching Amelia swirl in a pretty dress that an aunt had gifted while Clara received only a pat on the head. Clara would feel a prickling in her chest, painful, hot, and shameful. She would push it down, scold herself for feeling such a thing. Amelia was a good sister and had never been unkind to her. It wasn't Amelia's fault that everyone adored her. Clara told herself this many times, and yet each time someone chose Amelia over her, every time she was left standing alone while Amelia was swept into admiration and affection, that small snake of bitterness grew. One afternoon stands out in Clara's memory like a scene trapped in amber. The village was celebrating the end of harvest season, and there was to be a dance in the clearing by the big oak tree at the center of the village. Amelia had been excited for days, stitching ribbons onto her best dress and helping their mother prepare food for the celebration. Clara had been excited too. She loved the harvest dance, loved watching the colorful dresses and hearing the lively drum beats. But when the evening came, Clara suffered one of her coughing fits. It left her exhausted and pale, so her mother told her it would be best if she stayed home to rest. Clara protested softly. She didn't want to miss the celebration, but her mother was firm, and Amelia, looking worried, agreed that Clara shouldn't push herself. "I'll stay home with her," Amelia offered at once, putting aside the comb she was using to tame her hair into a bun. Amelia's dress fluttered around her ankles, the ribbons she'd sewn catching the lamplight. Clara wanted to cry, both from disappointment at missing the dance and from guilt that Amelia was willing to sacrifice her own excitement for her. She mustered a smile and said, "No, you go. I'll be fine." She meant it. Clara couldn't bear the thought of Amelia missing out. Their mother too insisted, "Go, Amelia, I'll watch over Clara." Reluctantly, Amelia hugged Clara and left for the dance, her footsteps fading into the evening. Clara lay on her cot, feeling the distant thump of drums through the ground. She pictured the celebration, the bonfire at the clearing, girls twirling in bright skirts, boys clapping and stamping their feet. And in the middle of it all, Amelia would shine, as she always did. Clara's chest tightened, not only from the remnant of her coughing, but from a sense of isolation. In that moment, lying in the lonely quiet of their room, while the distant sounds of laughter and music floated in, Clara felt that small snake of resentment unfurl a little more inside her. It whispered that she was missing out because she was weak, because she would never be like Amelia. Clara covered her ears with a pillow, trying to silence both the music and the whispering bitterness within. By the time Amelia returned home, breathless and glowing from the evening's dance, Clara was pretending to be asleep. She heard Amelia tiptoe into the room and felt her sister's light touch as Amelia checked her forehead for fever. Clara kept her eyes closed and her breathing steady, but her heart was pounding. Amelia's hand was gentle and cool. "Good night, Clara." Amelia whispered, brushing a stray strand of hair from Clara's face. Clara almost broke her pretense then, almost reached out to hug her sister and perhaps confess the ugly feelings that had plagued her that night. But she didn't. Shame and pride sealed her silence. She listened as Amelia's breathing grew slow and even in the next bed, and only then did Clara open her eyes to stare into the darkness. She felt a tear slip down her cheek. She was crying for reasons she could not fully articulate, partly for having missed the joyous night, partly for the loneliness that clung to her, and partly for the guilt of resenting the very person who was the kindest to her. That night marked the beginning of a change in Clara's heart. She became more aware of the differences between her and her sister, and every kind remark about Amelia now seemed to cut at Clara, reminding her of her own perceived shortcomings. She started to withdraw even more into herself, where once Clara would join Amelia in playing, or at least sit nearby and watch, now she often found excuses to be alone. She would volunteer to stay behind and help mother with chores when Amelia went out with friends, or she would claim she was tired and go to bed early, avoiding the evening gatherings in the compound. Clara's avoidance was not because she suddenly hated her sister. No, deep down she still admired Amelia and loved her dearly. Rather, it was because being in Amelia's shadow had become too painful for her fragile heart to bear. People in the village noticed only that Clara grew even quieter and more timid as she entered her teenage years. She still accompanied her mother to the market on occasion, but she kept her eyes lowered, flinching slightly if strangers looked at her for too long. She rarely spoke unprompted. When other girls gossiped and giggled about small things like a new dress or a funny story, Clara listened from the sidelines, unable to find her voice among them. Meanwhile, Amelia blossomed. At 15, Amelia was like a young sunflower turning heads as she walked. She had a natural grace and an easy smile. She wasn't the type to join in gossip. Instead, Amelia talked about dreams of becoming a nurse or a teacher someday, and the other girls would sigh that Amelia was sure to do something wonderful. Clara, listening, would swallow the bitter taste that rose in her throat. She too had dreams, quiet, secret dreams that she never spoke aloud because she feared being laughed at. Sometimes in the safety of night, she dreamed of being a writer or a poet, of telling stories that would make people see her in a different light. But she had never told Amelia or anyone else about that. How could she, when in everyone's eyes she was poor Clara, so timid, so frail? It was easier to let that part of her stay hidden, even as it ached to be seen. If there was one person who sensed Clara's inner turmoil, it was their mother, a gentle woman with tired eyes and calloused hands from years of work. Their mother loved both daughters fiercely. She noticed how Clara's smiles rarely reached her eyes anymore when Amelia received praise. She noticed how Clara would slip away to her room more often, and how sometimes she could hear the soft sounds of Clara crying at night. One day, as they shelled peas together in the kitchen, Clara's mother said softly, "Your sister loves you very much." Clara kept her eyes on the basket of peas, her fingers working mechanically. "I know," she whispered. A pea slipped from her trembling fingers and rolled across the floor. Her mother reached over and gently lifted Clara's chin, forcing her to meet her gaze. "And we love you just as much, Clara. You know that, don't you?" Clara nodded, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She didn't trust herself to speak. Her mother pulled her into a warm embrace, smelling of wood smoke and soap. "You have your own gifts, my dear. They may not be as obvious as your sister's, but they are there. Never forget that." Clara clung to her mother for a moment, soaking in the comfort. She wanted to ask what gifts, what could possibly make her as special as Amelia in anyone's eyes, but she remained silent. Deep down, a part of her felt that her mother was just being kind, the way mothers are. As seasons came and went, the sisters continued to grow under the watchful eyes of the village. By the time Amelia was 17 and Clara 15, a subtle shift had occurred in their lives. The playful days of childhood were giving way to new currents of youth. glances and shy smiles between boys and girls, the stirrings of first love whispered among friends. In these delicate years, a young man named Samuel began to frequent their home. Samuel was the son of a family friend who lived a few houses down the lane. He had kind eyes and an easygoing manner. Having finished his schooling in the nearby town, he often stopped by to deliver messages from his parents or to help Amelia and Clara's father with odd jobs, like fixing the fence or carrying heavy bags of feed for the goats. Samuel had been a familiar figure throughout Amelia and Clara's childhood, one of the neighborhood boys who sometimes joined the girls and others in chasing kites or picking mangoes. He was a few years older than Amelia, and as children that gap felt wide. But now he was a young man of 19, and Amelia nearly a grown woman. When Samuel came by the house these days, Clara noticed a new softness in his gaze when he spoke to Amelia. He would linger a little longer than necessary, asking Amelia about her day or offering to help her with tasks, even if Amelia insisted she could manage. For Clara, Samuel's visits became a secret source of both joy and pain. He was one of the few people who treated Clara with consistent kindness, never failing to greet her warmly. "Hello, Clara," he would say with a friendly smile that made her heart flutter with a confusing warmth. Sometimes he brought her little things from town, a new pencil for her writings or a ripe guava from the market, saying, "I know you like these." Those small attentions lit tiny sparks of happiness in Clara's otherwise lonely world. Over time, Clara found herself looking forward to Samuel's appearances. She treasured every moment of conversation with him, every kind word. In the quiet of her mind, she spun daydreams in which maybe, just maybe, someone like Samuel could see her as more than Amelia's timid little sister. One late afternoon, under the orange glow of the setting sun, Samuel arrived with a stack of books for Amelia, the study guides she had asked for to prepare for nursing school exams in the city. Amelia was thrilled and invited Samuel to stay for tea as a thank you. The three of them sat in the courtyard. Their mother brought out a tray with 3 steaming cups and a plate of biscuits. As they sipped the sweet milky tea, Amelia and Samuel chatted about the books and Amelia's hopes of attending a nursing program after finishing school. Clara listened quietly, as she often did, content to be near them. At one point, Amelia excused herself to fetch a particular notebook to show Samuel some of her notes. Clara and Samuel were left alone for a few minutes under the bougainvillea vine that draped the courtyard wall. Samuel turned to Clara, noticing a small notebook peeking from under her shawl. It was Clara's own journal. She always kept it close, jotting down poems and thoughts. "What are you writing these days, Clara?" he asked kindly. Clara hesitated, then shyly replied, Just little stories or poems." She felt a blush warm her cheeks. Samuel's interest felt gentle, not mocking. He smiled and said, "You've always had a way with words, ever since you were a child telling little tales. I remember you made up that story about the talking goat to make my sister laugh when she was sick." Clara blinked in surprise. She hadn't realized he remembered that. Before she could respond, Amelia returned, and Samuel's attention shifted back to her like a sunflower turning towards the sun. Clara watched the ease with which Amelia and Samuel talked, a lightness between them that seemed to lift both their spirits. Amelia showed him her notes, and Samuel praised her diligence. When Samuel finally rose to leave, Amelia walked him to the gate as Clara stayed behind, clearing the cups. Clara could hear their low voices at the gate, Amelia's musical laugh at something Samuel said. She dared a glance through the kitchen window. Samuel was handing Amelia something, a flower, a single yellow hibiscus from the bush near the gate. Amelia looked pleased and tucked the flower into her hair. Clara felt a pang deep in her chest. After Samuel left and Amelia came back inside, Clara pretended to be busy wiping the already clean table. Amelia, still smiling from the pleasant visit, placed the hibiscus on the table. "Wasn't that kind of him?" Amelia said, Samuel is such a thoughtful person. Clara nodded, forcing a smile. Inside, however, her heart felt like it was contracting, like a fist tightening around it. She gently touched the yellow petals of the flower once Amelia had left the room, and tears pricked at her eyes. In the following weeks, it became increasingly clear to everyone except perhaps the two young people themselves, that Amelia and Samuel were developing a special fondness for each other. Samuel found more reasons to visit, sometimes bringing fresh bread from the bakery for their family, sometimes just coming by under the pretense of asking Amelia's help in drafting a letter in English, as she was known for her neat handwriting and good English skills from school. Amelia would blush when the village ladies teased her about Samuel. "He's a good boy," she would say simply, though the sparkle in her eyes spoke volumes more. Clara watched these developments with a growing heaviness. She told herself it was inevitable. Of course, Samuel would prefer Amelia. Who wouldn't? Amelia was lovely and vivacious and kind. Clara tried to console herself with logic, but emotions are rarely swayed by reason. Each time she saw Amelia and Samuel walking together, chatting animatedly, or exchanging shy smiles, Clara felt that now familiar sting of envy sharpen. It wasn't that she wanted to begrudge Amelia happiness. In her better moments, Clara genuinely hoped Amelia would have all the joy in the world. But a selfish voice in Clara's heart cried, "What about me? Must I always be the one watching from the shadows while Amelia basks in the light?" That voice grew louder the day of the spring fair. Every year the village held a small fair when the wildflowers bloomed. A day of games, food, and music by the riverbank. Clara and Amelia went together with a group of girls from the village. Clara had been in an unusually cheerful mood that morning. The fair was one of the rare times she felt almost like any other girl her age, blending into a crowd, enjoying sweet fried dough and watching children fly kites. She even wore a new dress, plain, but a pretty shade of blue that her mother said brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. Amelia had helped braid Clara's hair and tied a white ribbon at the end of the braid, fussing affectionately over her, saying how nice she looked. Clara had blushed and felt closer to Amelia than she had in a while, the tension of her inner turmoil easing just a bit. At the fair, Clara stayed near Amelia, soaking in the day's merriment. They played a few games at the booths, laughed at a clownish performer, and shared a cool drink of ginger and pineapple. It almost felt like old times when they were just sisters enjoying a day out. Then, in the late afternoon, Samuel appeared at the fair. He spotted the sisters and joined them with a bright smile. "I was looking for you two," he said. "They're about to start the boat races on the river." His eyes, Clara noticed, were fixed primarily on Amelia. Together they all walked toward the river banks, where a crowd had gathered to watch young men race canoes downstream. There was excitement and bustle, people jostling lightly for a good view. In the throng, Clara got a bit separated from Amelia and Samuel, ending up just a few steps behind them. She could see the back of Amelia's head and Samuel's shoulder as he leaned down to speak close to Amelia's ear above the noise. When the race started, a cheer went up. In the enthusiasm, Amelia lost her footing for a second on the riverbank slope. Samuel instinctively caught her by the arm, steadying her. Clara saw Amelia laugh in thanks, and Samuel, emboldened by the moment, did not immediately let go. Instead, he drew Amelia a tiny bit closer to ensure she was safe from the jostling crowd. It was a small, protective gesture, one that an onlooker might not even notice amid the lively chaos of the race. But to Clara, that moment stretched and stood still. Amelia and Samuel together, an implicit understanding passing between their smiling faces. It was as if the rest of the world faded away for them. Clara felt a chill despite the warm afternoon. A wave of loneliness washed over her, so strong she feared she might collapse. She backed away from the crowd, suddenly needing space to breathe. None of her companions noticed her slip away. Everyone was focused on the river. Clara found a quiet spot behind a large cottonwood tree. She pressed her back against the rough bark, her hands trembling. In that private moment, she allowed silent tears to fall. She felt ashamed to be crying at what should have been a happy day. But watching Amelia and Samuel together had torn something open in her. It was more than just seeing the boy she quietly cared for, adoring her sister. It was the realization that this scene would repeat itself over and over. Today it was Samuel. Tomorrow it could be another good man, or a bright opportunity, or simply the love of the community. Always, it seemed to Clara, Amelia would effortlessly attract all that was golden and good, while Clara would be left with the scraps, if even that. A gentle voice startled her out of her thoughts. "Clara, are you all right?" It was one of the village women, Mrs. Obasi, who had wandered away from the crowd and nearly bumped into Clara behind the tree. Clara hurriedly wiped her face and mustered a weak smile. "I'm fine," she lied softly. Mrs. Obasi peered kindly at her. "You shouldn't hide back here, my dear. The race is such fun. Come, you'll miss it." Clara nodded obediently and followed the woman back toward the riverside, not trusting her own voice. As they rejoined the fringes of the crowd, Clara saw Amelia scanning the area with concern on her face. Their eyes met, and Amelia quickly wove her way over to her, Samuel following in her wake. "Clara, there you are. I was worried," Amelia exclaimed, slightly out of breath. She placed an arm around Clara's shoulder, the gesture full of sisterly concern and affection. "I'm okay. It was just a bit stuffy up there," Clara murmured. She could see the relief in Amelia's face and even in Samuel's posture as he stood nearby, as if both had feared something might have happened to her. It pained Clara to see them worry. It pained her even more to realize that despite the turmoil in her own heart, these two still genuinely cared for her. They stayed only a short while longer at the fair. Clara, pleading a mild headache, asked if they could go home early. Amelia readily agreed, fussing over Clara's health as they walked back, while Samuel accompanied them to ensure they got home safely. He left them at the gate with a friendly wave and a promise to check on Clara the next day. Watching Samuel stride away down the dusty lane, Clara felt her throat tighten. She could sense what was coming, even if no official words had been spoken yet. The way Amelia and Samuel looked at each other, the way their families smiled knowingly when the two were mentioned in the same sentence. It was as if the whole village was conspiring to weave their futures together. Indeed, only a few weeks later, the news Clara had dreaded arrived. Samuel formally asked Amelia's parents for permission to court their daughter, the traditional first step toward an engagement. It was a sunny morning when Amelia came to Clara with the news. Clara was sitting under the shade of the guava tree in their yard, scribbling lines of a poem in her journal, when Amelia nearly skipped across the yard to her. "Clara!" Amelia called, barely containing her excitement. Clara looked up and managed a smile as Amelia sank down on the grass beside her. Amelia's cheeks were flushed pink and her eyes danced. She took Clara's hands in hers. "Samuel spoke to father and mother last night," she blurted out. He wants to marry me." Amelia gave a half gasp, half laugh of disbelief, as if she herself could hardly believe it. Clara's stomach dropped even as she squeezed Amelia's hands back, trying to mirror her sister's smile. That's wonderful," Clara said, her voice sounding thin in her own ears. Amelia threw her arms around Clara in a hug, not noticing how stiffly Clara responded. "I told him I needed some time to think, but truthfully," Amelia pulled back, lowering her voice as if sharing a guilty secret. "Truthfully, I'm so happy, Clara. I care for him deeply. I think I could be very happy with Samuel." There was an earnest, almost pleading look in Amelia's eyes, as though she needed her sister's blessing, her sister's happiness for her, to make this moment complete. Clara felt something shatter quietly inside her, but she mustered every ounce of strength to not let it show. She reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind Amelia's ear, the way she'd seen their mother do countless times. "You deserve to be happy." Clara whispered, and managed a genuine smile through the pain because, in that moment, she did love her sister and wanted her happiness, no matter the cost to herself. Amelia beamed and hugged her again. Thank you, Clara. That means so much to me. As Amelia went inside to help their mother with chores, Clara remained under the guava tree, her journal open in her lap. The words she had been writing had blurred on the page, distorted by a droplet. Only then did Clara realize a tear had fallen and smudged the ink. She closed the journal, pressing it against her chest, and allowed herself a few minutes of silent grief under the swaying branches. In the days that followed, the village buzzed with the news of Amelia and Samuel. Although Amelia had technically only agreed to be courted for now, everyone assumed it was as good as an engagement. Samuel's family and Amelia's began discussing tentative plans. Nothing formal, just hopeful chatter about maybe holding a small engagement ceremony after the next harvest and a wedding sometime the following year if all went well. Neighbors congratulated Amelia when they saw her and clucked sympathetically at Clara, saying things like, "Don't worry, dear, you're next in line. A fine young man will come for you too in time." These words were meant kindly, but they felt like nettles against Clara's skin. She would nod and force a smile, all the while thinking, "No, I won't be next. No fine young man will come for me. Don't they see," she thought, "there is no line, only Amelia's radiant path and me in the shadows." Clara's internal struggles deepened. Night after night, she lay awake on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, while Amelia slept soundly nearby, dreaming no doubt of a bright future. Clara's thoughts were not gentle lullabies, but storms. Sometimes she pictured what life would be like when Amelia married. Amelia would move into Samuel's home, possibly even to another town, if Samuel's work led him away. Clara would remain behind, alone with their aging parents, and the village would fully forget her existence, except as the sister left behind. She imagined the years stretching before her in lonely succession, every day a reminder that she was not chosen, not wanted in the way Amelia was. Other times, Clara felt a twisting guilt as she imagined saying farewell to Amelia. She would miss her sister terribly despite everything, and the thought of Amelia not being there each day was painful. In nearly the same breath, Clara's mind would then whisper, "If Amelia were not here, I wouldn't live under her shadow." And she would shudder, horrified at herself for even thinking such a thing. These conflicting emotions, love and envy, dependence and resentment, warred within Clara, eroding her from the inside. She became paler, more withdrawn. Her mother fretted that Clara's old sickness was returning, as Clara often complained of headaches or fatigue to avoid extended social gatherings. Amelia was preoccupied with her own blossoming love and plans, but she still tried to include Clara whenever she could. She invited Clara along when Samuel suggested an outing to the next town's market, and she made sure Samuel spent time talking with Clara too, trying to bridge the gap she sensed. Clara went along, unable to refuse without raising suspicion, but each such outing felt like salt rubbed into her wounds. Watching the man she had quietly adored hold her sister's hand, hearing them share laughter that no one else could understand. To the outside world, Clara remained dutiful and calm. She did not throw fits or outwardly begrudge her sister. Only her downcast eyes and forced smiles hinted that something was amiss, but the villagers took it as natural sadness at the prospect of a sibling moving on in life. They expected she would cheer up with time. No one guessed the ferocity of the tempest that raged in Clara's heart. She herself barely understood the darkness that had settled over her. There were moments it frightened her, the intensity of her own jealousy. In the silence of an afternoon when the house was empty, Clara would sometimes whisper to herself, "I'm sorry," without really knowing to whom or for what, except that she felt on the edge of doing something terrible or falling apart entirely. Clara began to have nightmares again, like when she was a sickly child. She dreamed of being lost in a thick fog while Amelia's voice called out to her, but she couldn't find her sister no matter how far she ran. She dreamed of standing by the river during the fair, but this time she was on one side of the river and Amelia on the other. And no matter how much Clara cried out, Amelia couldn't hear her over the roar of the water. Often, Clara woke up with tears on her face, her pillow damp, and her throat sore from swallowing sobs. Amelia noticed the dark circles under Clara's eyes and urged her to see the herbalist or let her mix a tonic, but Clara brushed it off as poor sleep, nothing more. All the while, the village hummed with anticipation for the likely union of Amelia and Samuel. It was during this period that Clara's sense of isolation peaked. She felt she had no one to confide in. How could she confess the ugliness in her heart to anyone when everyone loved Amelia? They would think her a monster for begrudging her own flesh and blood happiness. Perhaps they'd be right. So Clara carried the burden alone, a weight that seemed to grow heavier each passing day. Under this strain, Clara's fragile hold on her better nature began to fray. The jealousy that had long quietly poisoned her thoughts was now pushing her towards a dangerous precipice. She found herself entertaining thoughts that would have once horrified her. Jealousy, like a demon perched on her shoulder, whispered insidious suggestions into her ear. It told her that if Amelia's engagement somehow fell apart, if Samuel changed his mind or was no longer in the picture, then maybe things could go back to how they were. Maybe Clara could have a chance at happiness, or at least she wouldn't have to face the pain of losing her sister and being left utterly alone in the shadows. At first, Clara recoiled from such thoughts. She berated herself for even considering any action that could hurt Amelia. But day by day, as she witnessed Amelia's joy, a joy she was not truly a part of, those dark thoughts began to take root. Finally, one fateful evening, Clara reached a breaking point. It was after dinner. Their parents had retired early, their father exhausted from the fields, and their mother from a day of housework. Amelia and Clara were washing the dishes together by the light of a kerosene lamp, a nightly routine. Amelia was humming softly, a cheerful love song that had been going around the village, undoubtedly because so many saw it as Amelia and Samuel's song after they danced to it at a recent gathering. The sound grated against Clara's ears this time. Without meaning to, Clara slammed a clay cup down harder than intended. It cracked, a jagged line splitting it in two. The sudden noise made Amelia jump and fall silent. "Clara, are you all right?" Amelia asked gently. Clara stared at the broken cup in her hands, and for a moment something inside her snapped. She wanted to scream that no, she was not all right, that she hadn't been all right in a long time. She wanted to shout and sob and let all the hurt pour out, but she could not form the words. Instead, Clara dropped the pieces of the cup, turned and fled from the kitchen, leaving Amelia standing there calling after her in alarm. Clara didn't stop until she reached the far end of the compound, near the old well that was seldom used after a pump had been installed for water. She sank to the ground, her back against the cool plaster of the outer wall, and finally let the sobs come. She pressed her fist against her mouth to stifle the noise, tears streaming down her face. She felt at war with herself, one part of her horrified at her own behavior, another part too hurt and angry to care. After a few minutes, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up to see Amelia's face, worried and tender in the lamplight she had carried out. Amelia set the lamp down and knelt beside Clara. "Please talk to me, Clara," Amelia pleaded softly. "What's wrong? You've been so unhappy. Have I done something to upset you?" Amelia's genuine confusion and concern made Clara feel as though her heart were being squeezed. Clara shook her head, unable to articulate the whirlwind within her. How could she possibly explain? Amelia pulled her into a tight hug. Clara was stiff at first, but then melted into her sister's arms, sobbing into Amelia's shoulder as Amelia stroked her hair. "It's okay, I'm here," Amelia murmured. Clara wanted to scream that it was not okay, that things would never be okay if nothing changed. But she clung to Amelia, crying until she had no tears left. Eventually, Amelia helped Clara back to their room. They didn't say much. Amelia seemed to sense that pushing Clara for an explanation right then might do more harm than good. She simply helped wash Clara's face with a cool cloth and sat with her until she calmed. "I'm sorry about the cup," Clara whispered eventually, voice hoarse. Amelia just shook her head. "It's just a cup. I'm worried about you." Clara bit her lip, eyes downcast. "I'm just tired. I think I need sleep." Amelia squeezed her hand gently. "All right, but promise me, when you're ready, you'll tell me what's been hurting you. I hate to see you like this." Clara nodded slightly, though she didn't know if that day would ever come. Soon after, Amelia fell asleep. Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling again. Her sister's kindness, her genuine distress at Clara's pain, only made Clara feel more wretched. It would almost be easier if Amelia had been conceited or cruel. But Amelia's goodness was unwavering, which made Clara's envy and plotting feel all the more monstrous. Yet the very next day, when Samuel came by in the afternoon and Clara watched him and Amelia talk excitedly about a new plot of land Samuel's uncle was selling, one that Samuel was considering buying for when he and Amelia married, Clara felt that dark resolve harden in her. The kindness of her sister, the tenderness of Samuel, the well-meaning pity of the villagers, none of it could soothe the raw ache in her soul. That evening, Clara made a decision that would forever alter the fates of everyone she loved. She decided she would not stand by and watch Amelia step into a future that left her completely alone in the shadows. If fate would not be kind to Clara, then perhaps Clara would have to take matters into her own hands, even if it meant damning herself in the process. Clara's plan unfolded on a moonless night. She had resolved to speak to Samuel in person, believing that her words, spoken with the earnestness of a concerned sister, would carry more weight than any anonymous letter. The opportunity came when she learned Samuel would be staying late at the small community center one evening, helping to clean up after a meeting, with her parents and Amelia assuming she was visiting a friend nearby. Clara made her way down the quiet dirt road, heart pounding as fast as the crickets chirped in the grass. She found Samuel alone, stacking chairs under the dim glow of a single bulb. He looked up in surprise when he saw Clara hovering at the doorway. "Clara, is everything all right?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. It was unusual for Clara to seek him out on her own. Clara stepped inside, rubbing her clammy palms against her skirt. Her throat nearly closed up. For a moment she considered abandoning the entire scheme and fleeing. But then she thought of Amelia leaving, of being alone, of every kind smile and bright future slipping out of her reach, and she steeled herself. I need to talk to you, Samuel," Clara began softly. She knew she must look a fright, face pale and eyes wide. Samuel's expression shifted to concern. He pulled over one of the chairs. "Of course, sit down, Clara. What is it?" Clara shook her head, remaining standing. If she sat, her resolve might crumble. She looked at the ground, unable to meet his kind eyes, and whispered, "This is very difficult. But I'm afraid Amelia is not as happy about the courtship as everyone thinks." She heard Samuel's sharp intake of breath. He took a step closer. "What do you mean? Did Amelia say something to you?" Clara's nails dug into her palms. She confided in me that she's unsure, that maybe things are moving too fast." It wasn't yet the lie absolute, more an ambiguity, but Clara saw the flicker of worry in Samuel's face. Encouraged by that, the words tumbled out faster. "She has dreams, you know, of going to the city for her nursing. She worries that, marrying so soon might tie her down." Clara hated herself for painting Amelia as hesitant, but she pressed on, each false word strangely easing the jealousy in her own heart with cruel hope. I just thought, since I care about you both, that you should know she's conflicted. She didn't want to hurt you or upset anyone, so she's kept it to herself. Clara's voice quivered with true emotion now, misery and guilt mixing into something Samuel easily misinterpreted as sorrow for her sister's plight. Samuel ran a hand through his hair, clearly troubled. She never said anything like that to me. We've talked about her nursing, and I always told her I'd support whatever she wanted to do. His voice was anxious. Clara bit her lip hard, feeling the taste of blood. Should she stop now and confess she was lying? But then Samuel asked, almost in a plea, Is there someone else, Clara? Do you think she's met someone in the city or has other feelings? There it was, the opening for the cruelest lie of all. Clara could scarcely breathe. Her heart thundered. She knew this was the point of no return. In the dim light, she could see the desperation in Samuel's face as he waited for her answer. This was a young man deeply in love, terrified of losing the girl he adored. Clara lowered her eyes, tears of stress and regret gathering despite herself. In a barely audible voice, she said, I'm not sure, but I think maybe there was someone she mentioned from the nursing classes. Just a friend, she said. But lately, I've wondered if perhaps her heart might be leaning that way. The words felt like poison on her tongue. Samuel staggered back a half step as if struck. He was silent for a long moment. The only sounds were the night insects and distant music from someone's radio in the village. Finally, Samuel whispered, Why would she agree to my courtship if her heart is elsewhere? Why wouldn't she tell me? Clara dared to look at him then, her own eyes brimming with tears, tears of genuine anguish that he naturally attributed to empathy. Amelia didn't want to disappoint anyone, she murmured. Not you, not our parents. She thought perhaps in time she could sort out her feelings. She never meant to mislead you. Each lie twisted deeper into Clara's conscience, yet outwardly she appeared simply sorrowful. Samuel clenched and unclenched his fists. He looked utterly stricken. Clara felt her own heart wrench. She had never seen a man look so heartbroken, and knowing she was causing it made her nearly choke on remorse. For a moment she opened her mouth, wanting to take it all back. But a vision of Amelia's bright face rose in her mind. Amelia in a bridal dress, leaving with Samuel, leaving Clara behind, and the dark jealousy surged up to choke out any confession. I'm telling you this because I thought it would be crueler for her to continue if her heart isn't fully in it, Clara managed to say. It sounded sanctimonious even to her own ears. She rushed on. Maybe you should talk to her. Or perhaps give her some space to think. If you truly love her, you wouldn't want her to feel trapped, would you? She knew she was manipulating him, preying on his genuine love. The shame of it burned at her, but she couldn't stop now. Samuel pressed his hands to his face, inhaling shakily. I would never want her unhappy or trapped, he said through his fingers. He took them away and looked at Clara with red-rimmed eyes. Thank you for being honest with me, Clara. I need to figure out what to do. Clara just nodded, unable to speak further. She turned and left, practically stumbling out into the night, tears streaming freely the moment her back was to him. She didn't go straight home. Instead, she wandered to the edge of the village, where a lone baobab tree stood under the starless sky. There, in the silent company of that ancient tree, Clara fell to her knees in the grass and wept, hands pressed against her mouth to muffle the sound. She had done it. There was no going back now. Between her and Amelia, she had dropped a bomb that would shatter their world. She prayed an incoherent, desperate prayer to be forgiven, to be understood, even as a part of her still selfishly prayed that somehow this would mean she wouldn't lose her sister to marriage and loneliness. Her stomach churned with guilt until she retched up the dinner she'd eaten earlier, tears still spilling down her face. When Clara finally returned home, it was late. The house was dark and quiet. She slipped into bed, not realizing that her dress still bore stains of grass and her eyes were swollen. Amelia's soft breathing told Clara she was asleep. In the darkness, Clara whispered, "I'm sorry," so faintly that only the night heard her. Then she turned her back to her sister and curled into herself, hollow and exhausted. Amelia was blindsided. Clara watched as confusion, embarrassment, and heartbreak played out across her sister's face. "I don't understand," Amelia whispered to their mother one afternoon when she thought Clara wasn't listening. "Everything was going well. We didn't quarrel. Nothing. Why would he suddenly do this?" Their mother had no answer, only comfort, assuming perhaps that young men can be fickle or fear commitment. The villagers were perplexed too. Some speculated that maybe Samuel felt he wasn't ready to settle down. Others wondered if Amelia had a change of heart and quietly asked him to leave. After all, they said, Amelia had always been ambitious about her studies. Maybe she realized she wanted to focus on that instead of marrying young. All of this talk reached Amelia's ears and pained her deeply because she had wanted the engagement. She had truly loved Samuel, or at least grown to love the idea of a future with him. One twilight, about a week after Samuel had left the village for the city, Clara found Amelia in their small backyard, sitting on the bench under the mango tree. The sun had just set, and a purple twilight hung in the sky. Amelia was holding something in her hands, the dried, pressed remains of the yellow hibiscus flower Samuel had given her once. Clara recognized it. Amelia had tucked the pressed bloom inside her diary. Now Amelia was turning it over gently between her fingers. Clara approached quietly, her footsteps crunching on dried leaves. Amelia looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but calm. "I must have done something wrong, Clara," Amelia said softly, breaking the silence. Clara's heart thumped. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Amelia managed a small, fragile smile. "Samuel didn't say it in so many words, but I think maybe he sensed I wasn't ready. Or perhaps I hurt him without knowing. I wish I knew how to make it right." Her voice cracked just a little. "I wish I could talk to him, but he's gone." Clara felt tears welling up, guilt stabbing her with every syllable Amelia uttered. She longed to say, "It's not your fault, it's mine. You did nothing wrong." But her throat closed, fear and shame freezing her. Instead, she sat beside Amelia and gently took the pressed flower from her sister's hands, holding it as if it were a delicate piece of glass. "Sometimes people leave without giving us answers," Clara said quietly, her words as much a confession to herself as a comfort to Amelia. "Maybe it wasn't meant to be." Amelia looked at her with sad eyes. "Maybe," Amelia whispered. She gave a half-hearted, fragile smile then, and leaned her head on Clara's shoulder. Clara put an arm around her, and they sat in tender silence for a few minutes as dusk settled around them. Clara approached that moment with a mix of hope and self-loathing. Holding her broken-hearted sister, she felt the enormity of what she had done. A part of her dared to hope that maybe this suffering she had caused could bring them closer again, that she could comfort Amelia through it and somehow redeem herself. But another part of Clara knew that she was the source of this heartbreak, and the guilt of it was a crushing weight. She realized she could not carry the secret much longer. It was a fire consuming her from within. After that evening, Clara knew she couldn't hide the truth much longer. The guilt was eating her alive. She hardly slept. When she did, she dreamed of Amelia drowning in the river while Samuel stood on one bank and Clara on the other, and neither could reach her in time. She would wake up sweating, calling out Amelia's name in the darkness. Amelia, ever concerned, would stir and ask if she was all right, and Clara would just muffle her cries and say it was a bad dream. Finally, the truth clawed its way out into the open on a night when the rains came. It was early monsoon season, and a heavy downpour battered the village roofs, filling the air with the roar of water. The family had finished supper in near silence, the only sound the rain drumming on the tin roof. Their father retired to bed, and their mother, sensing the lingering sorrow, gave both daughters a kiss on the head and also retreated, leaving Amelia and Clara by the small coal stove, cleaning up. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the distance. Amelia seemed restless. She stood by the window, watching the rain. Clara was clearing the last of the dishes when she heard Amelia's soft voice cut through the hush. "Clara, do you think Samuel will ever come back?" Clara set the dishes down. Her hands were shaking. Amelia rarely spoke his name now. To hear it was startling. Clara turned to see Amelia still facing the window, her slender back illuminated by flickers of lightning. Clara opened her mouth, wanting so badly to spill everything, to beg forgiveness, but she couldn't find the words. Instead, she said, "I don't know." Her voice was strained. Perhaps it was something in that tone, or the way Clara hovered uncertainly, that made Amelia turn and really look at her sister's face. Even in the dim light, Clara's torment must have been evident. Amelia frowned and stepped closer. "Clara, there's something. You've been so on edge. Please, if you know something, tell me." There was an urgency in Amelia's voice. Clara's heart pounded like the thunder outside. Amelia gently took Clara's hands, noticing the way Clara startled at the touch. "You do know something, don't you?" Amelia whispered. Clara's defenses crumpled. Perhaps it was the weight of Amelia's grief, the storm outside, or her own gnawing conscience, but she could no longer maintain the lie. With a broken cry, Clara sank to her knees on the kitchen floor, clutching Amelia's hands in hers. "Forgive me. Please forgive me," she choked out. Amelia knelt too, alarmed and confused, trying to pull Clara back up. "What are you talking about? Forgive you for what?" Amelia said, her voice urgent and rising in panic as she took in the sight of her sister collapsing with emotion. All the years of pent-up envy and sorrow poured out in a torrent of words and tears. Haltingly, amid sobs, Clara confessed everything: her jealousy, her despair, and finally, in ragged whispers, the deception she had told Samuel. As the words spilled forth, she kept her eyes squeezed shut, not daring to see Amelia's face. She spoke of how she told Samuel that Amelia had doubts and possibly feelings for someone else. She admitted that none of it was true, that she did it out of fear of losing her, out of jealousy and hurt. Once she started, she couldn't stop. The confession came tumbling out, a dam broken, leaving Clara gasping and trembling by the end, her forehead nearly touching the floor at Amelia's feet. For a long moment, the only sound was the relentless rain hammering the roof and Clara's own hiccuping sobs. Slowly, fearfully, Clara lifted her gaze to Amelia. Amelia had gone deathly pale, her eyes wide and glassy with shock. She looked as if she had been struck across the face. "You told him those lies?" Amelia's voice was almost inaudible, barely a breath. Clara nodded miserably. I'm so sorry. I was not myself. I was so jealous, Amy. "I'm sorry," she babbled, reaching for Amelia's hand. But Amelia recoiled as if Clara's touch burned. Amelia rose unsteadily to her feet. Clara scrambled up as well, panic rising in her. Amelia pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. "How could you?" she managed, her voice breaking into a sob. "I loved him, Clara. I thought he didn't want me. And all this time—" She couldn't finish. Clara moved towards her, but Amelia stepped back, her eyes flashing with a hurt Clara had never seen before. All this time, it was you? Amelia's shoulders shook, whether from anger or heartbreak or both. Clara reached out again, desperate, and this time Amelia didn't pull away when Clara gripped the sleeves of her dress. I was jealous, Clara wept. I was a horrible, jealous fool. I felt like everything good always went to you, and I was left with nothing. It ate at me, day and night. I wasn't strong like you, Amelia. I couldn't fight it. Please believe me. I never wanted to hurt you so deeply. I thought if you stayed, I wouldn't be alone. I thought I was saving us both from drifting apart. I was wrong. I see it now. I see it. The words came tumbling out, mixed with desperate tears. Amelia's eyes searched Clara's face, and in them Clara saw not hatred, but a profound sorrow and betrayal. Amelia gently pried Clara's hands off her arms. You have destroyed something, Clara, she said quietly, her breath hitching with sobs she was trying to contain. Not just my relationship with Samuel, but something between us. At those words, Clara felt a bolt of panic. No, please, she tried to interject, but Amelia continued, voice trembling. All my life I loved you, defended you, never saw you as any less. If I ever had anything more, I wanted to share it with you. How could you believe you had nothing? You had my love, Clara. You always had my love. Hearing Amelia say that, seeing the devastation on her beloved sister's face, something in Clara shattered completely. Before she could respond, Amelia turned and fled from the kitchen, as if she could not bear to be under the same roof a moment longer. Amelia, Clara cried, chasing after her. Outside, the rain was coming down in sheets. Amelia burst through the front door into the stormy night, her hair and clothes quickly soaking through. Clara followed, the cold rain slapping her skin and thunder cracking overhead. Amelia ran heedlessly across the yard, and Clara feared she might tear out into the open road. Amelia, please, she called, her voice nearly drowned by the deluge. Amelia halted near the old well at the edge of their compound, the same spot where just days ago Clara had wept in Amelia's arms. Now it was Amelia who stood there hunched in misery, arms wrapped around herself, head bowed under the onslaught of rain. Clara approached slowly, her feet slipping in the mud. She was just a few paces behind when Amelia whirled around, rain mingled with tears on Amelia's face. Are you happy now, Clara? Amelia screamed over the storm, her voice raw. You wanted me to stay, and I'm still here. I'm here in misery. Is that what you wanted? Clara shook her head frantically, sobbing, rainwater blurring her vision. No, I never wanted this. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong. She reached out, trying to embrace Amelia, longing to somehow mend what she had broken. Amelia stepped back from Clara's outstretched arms, moving further onto the stone lip of the old well. The well had once been covered with wooden boards, but those had long rotted away. Now there was only a gaping dark maw half covered by a slab of loose tin. In her anguish, Amelia didn't realize the danger. Clara's heart lurched. Amelia, wait! Don't step back, she cried out, but it was too late. Amelia's foot landed on the slick tin sheet. It skidded, shifting perilously. Amelia's arms flailed as she lost her balance. For one suspended moment, their eyes met. Amelia's wide with fear and regret, Clara's with horror. Clara lunged forward to grab her sister's hand, but her fingers only brushed Amelia's for a split second. Then Amelia toppled backward and disappeared into the yawning darkness of the well. A scream tore from Clara's throat, a sound unlike anything she'd ever made. Pure, primal terror. She threw herself to the ground, reaching into the well. The rain was torrential, making everything slippery. Amelia! Amelia! Clara screamed, her voice cracking. The only answer was the echo of her own voice and the pounding rain. She could see nothing in the pitch black below. Frantic, Clara looked around and grabbed the rope that still hung from the old pulley of the well, used long ago for drawing water. She lowered it into the darkness, shouting her sister's name over and over, her words garbled by sobs and rain. By now, the commotion had woken their parents. Lights flickered on in the house and in a few neighboring compounds. Clara did not notice. She was half over the lip of the well, desperate to find Amelia. The rope suddenly pulled taut, and for a hopeful instant, Clara thought Amelia had caught hold of it. "Hold on, Amy! Hold on!" Clara cried, using all her strength to tug. But the rope merely swung limply after a moment. It must have snagged on something, then come loose. Clara was beside herself with panic. Without hesitating, she gripped the edge of the well and tried to lower herself in, determined to reach Amelia. The interior wall was damp and mossy. Her feet sought purchase on the stones. "Clara, stop!" a voice yelled behind her. Strong arms grabbed her around the waist, hauling her back. It was her father, drenched from the rain, eyes wide with fear. Their mother was just behind him, holding a lantern in one hand and covering her mouth with the other, her face white as chalk. Clara fought against her father's grip, screaming incoherently, "Let me go! She's down there! We have to save her!" Her father held tight, though tears mingled with rain on his face as well. Neighbors were arriving now, a few men rushing forward with ropes and lanterns once they understood what had happened. It all became a blur for Clara. She was set aside, her mother's arms encircling her tightly as she shook uncontrollably, rain still pouring over them all. A couple of young men, including one of Amelia's school friends, tied ropes around their waists and descended into the well, while others held the line steady. It felt like an eternity. Clara prayed feverishly through chattering teeth, her whole body trembling not just from cold but from soul-deep dread. Finally, there was a shout from below. Moments later, the men were hoisting something heavy up. By the shifting lantern light, Clara saw one of the men emerge, arms wrapped around Amelia's limp form, as another man below helped push her upwards. Several villagers ran to assist, carefully laying Amelia down on the wet ground a safe distance from the well. "Amelia!" Clara broke free from her mother and stumbled to her sister's side. Someone had laid their own jacket under Amelia's head, and another person tried to shield her from the rain with a mat held overhead. Amelia's eyes were closed, her face ashen. A gash on her forehead trickled blood that mixed with the rainwater. Her chest was not moving. Clara felt the world spin. "No, no, no," she moaned, reaching out with trembling fingers to feel for a pulse at Amelia's neck, the way Amelia, aspiring to be a nurse, had once shown her. Nothing, or was that a faint flutter? The crowd pressed around. One of the men who had gone down was coughing up water, and through sputters he reported, She was floating face down. We got her out as quick as we could." Clara could barely hear over the rushing blood in her ears. She grasped Amelia's hand. It was still warm, but frighteningly limp. "Amelia, please," she whispered. Her father was on the other side of Amelia, trying not to sob as he attempted the crude village method of resuscitation, pressing on her chest and blowing air into her mouth. Their mother knelt by Amelia's head, smoothing wet hair from her daughter's face, her tears falling onto Amelia's cheeks. The world held its breath as lightning lit up the sky like midday for a split second, then all was thunder and chaos and prayers muttered under breaths. After what felt like an endless void of hope and despair, Amelia coughed weakly. Water sputtered from her lips as her chest hitched. "She's breathing," someone cried. A collective sigh of relief rippled, though the tension remained thick. Amelia's eyes fluttered open faintly. She looked confused and in pain. Her father supported her head, talking to her, but Amelia didn't seem to hear. She winced, a whimper escaping her lips. Clara squeezed her hand, leaning close so Amelia could see her through the rain and lantern glow. "Amelia, you're okay. You'll be okay," Clara cried, half delirious with relief that her sister was alive. We've got you. I'm here. I'm here. Amelia's unfocused eyes drifted to Clara. Clara, she murmured, barely audible. Clara leaned closer. Amelia's hand twitched in Clara's grasp, as if she was trying to return the squeeze. With great effort, Amelia whispered, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. A sob tore from Clara. Why was Amelia apologizing? She was the injured one, the wronged one. No, I'm sorry, Clara sobbed. Please, just hold on. You're going to be fine. But even as she said it, she could feel how feeble Amelia's grip was, how labored her breaths had become. The villagers decided to carry Amelia inside, away from the rain, and send for the doctor from the next town. But in their hearts, many feared the worst. They gently transferred Amelia to a makeshift stretcher of woven mats. Clara clung to her sister's hand every step of the way, refusing to let go, even as her father tried to get her to give space. They laid Amelia on the living room floor, since it was closest to the door, and someone propped her head up on a pillow. The rain continued to drench the world outside. Neighbors lit extra lanterns, casting a warm glow that flickered over Amelia's pale face. Amelia's breaths were shallow and raspy. Her eyes were half open, as if she was drifting somewhere between this world and the next. Clara held her hand and stroked it, sobbing quietly. Their mother held Amelia's other hand, tears streaming as she whispered prayers. Their father paced outside, shouting for someone to please hurry with the doctor. In the flicker of the lantern, Amelia's eyes moved, searching until they found Clara's face. With a faint smile that broke Clara's heart anew, Amelia mustered her strength to speak one last time. Clara, live for me, she gasped out. Clara shook her head desperately, clutching Amelia's hand to her chest. Don't talk like that. You'll be fine. We'll have you dancing in no time, she rambled, voice quavering. Amelia's fingers lightly squeezed once more, as if to hush her. I love you, sister, Amelia managed. A peaceful look crossed her face then, almost a release. Clara felt Amelia's hand go slack, even before the final breath left her lips. No, 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 Clara wailed, wrapping herself over Amelia's still body, as if her own warmth could rekindle life in it. The room erupted in sorrowful cries as it became clear Amelia was gone. Their mother screamed Amelia's name and fell across her daughter's body. And their father, returning soaked from the rain, let out a bellow of grief that carried into the night. Clara could only cling to Amelia, rocking back and forth, her own wails soft and haunting. Wake up, Amelia! Please, wake up! She kept begging in vain, pressing her forehead to Amelia's cold cheek. But Amelia did not wake again. The days that followed passed in a blur for Clara. The village mourned as it had never mourned before. Amelia had been their pride and joy in many ways, and now she was gone in the most tragic of circumstances. People came with condolences, with stories of Amelia's kindness, with sobs of their own for the girl with the radiant smile who had been taken so soon. They spoke of her in hushed, reverent tones, calling her an angel, a light, a star fallen from the sky. Clara heard none of it. She moved as a ghost through the funeral rites, her eyes swollen and blank, her fragile body seemingly held together by nothing but sorrow. She had not spoken a word since that night, not even when Samuel returned upon hearing the news. He stood at Amelia's graveside, weeping openly, and tried to offer Clara comfort, not knowing his presence only twisted the knife of guilt deeper. Clara had merely stared at him with hollow eyes, then turned away. In the silent days after Amelia was laid to rest, Clara often found herself curled up on her sister's neatly made bed, clutching Amelia's favorite shawl. She would stay there for hours, sometimes whispering apologies into the fabric until she fell into a fitful sleep and awoke to the same endless ache. Their mother and father were deeply worried for Clara's sanity, but they too were drowned in their own grief and confusion. Clara had not told them the details of her role in the tragedy, but her mother had pieced together enough from that night's confrontation and Clara's own confession to Amelia. Perhaps out of mercy, her parents never confronted her with blame. There was no need. Clara's every vacant stare, every flinch at the mention of Amelia's name, every sob that racked her thin frame spoke of the torment within. The villagers eventually learned fragments of the truth, as rumors often find a way. Some said that Clara had quarreled with Amelia that night, that maybe jealousy had led to a push, to a fall. Others more charitably said it was just a terrible accident. Whichever version they believed, many looked at Clara now with a mixture of pity and wariness. The once invisible girl was invisible no longer, but for all the wrong reasons. Now when she walked through the village, on the rare occasions she left the house, she felt the weight of their stares and hushed whispers. "That's the sister," they would say, as if she had no name of her own. Some villagers, unable to contain their indignation, muttered that it should have been Clara who died instead of sweet Amelia. Those words never reached Clara's ears directly, but she felt their sentiment in every cold shoulder and averted gaze. Not that any punishment or scorn from the outside world could match the condemnation Clara had for herself. Each day she lived felt like a sentence to endure. She replayed her memories over and over. Amelia's laughter, Amelia's kindness, Amelia's face when she realized Clara's betrayal, and that final horrible moment by the well. In all her nightmares, Clara never imagined that her jealousy could lead to such a calamity. She had wanted, in her twisted reasoning, to keep Amelia in her life, and in the end her actions had wiped Amelia out of it entirely. It was an outcome so cruel and absolute that Clara often wished she could claw back time, even if it meant tearing out her own traitorous heart in the process. One evening, about a month after Amelia's death, Clara found herself standing by the old well. It had been covered and sealed after the incident, at her father's insistence, so that no one would ever fall in again. Clara touched the new cemented cover. It felt cold and unyielding under her fingers. She stood there a long while in the purple dusk, as fireflies began to blink in the air. She thought about how, under different circumstances, she and Amelia might have been sitting on the veranda at this time, chatting about little things or reading quietly together. Perhaps Amelia would be teasing her about some village boy or asking her opinion on a new recipe. Instead, there was only silence and the sound of distant crickets. Clara realized this was her life now, an endless procession of days without her sister, without the one person who had loved her unconditionally. The very thing she had feared, being alone, unloved, had come to pass in the most devastating way. Jealousy had consumed her heart, and in the end, it had destroyed everything she held dear. In trying to prevent her own loneliness, she had created a loneliness far more profound than anything she had imagined. Tears rolled down Clara's cheeks as she whispered into the twilight, "I'm sorry, Amelia." It was a refrain she would repeat every day of her life, a penance that would never feel complete. The tragedy of the two sisters became a cautionary tale in the village for years to come. Parents would hush quarrelsome children by reminding them of Amelia and Clara, of how envy and bitterness could pave a path to unimaginable sorrow. As for Clara, she lived on in that village, a shadow of the girl she used to be. She helped her parents as best she could, spoke little, and smiled never. In her heart, she carried a graveyard of regrets. The storyteller of the village, an old man who knew well the histories of his people, would often say that on some nights, if one listened closely near the old well, one could hear the soft sound of a woman weeping and apologizing into the wind. Many believed it was Clara, visiting the place where her sister's life was lost, pouring out her sorrow to the darkness. Others said it was Amelia's spirit, crying for the sister she had loved so much despite it all. But Clara knew the truth. The voice of grief and repentance belonged to her alone. bound forever to the memory of Amelia. And so the story ended as sadly as anyone could remember, with a once loving bond shattered by jealousy's cruel hand. The beautiful and admired Amelia was gone, and fragile Clara remained, consumed by the very envy that had driven her. In the quiet that followed the storm of tragedy, there was only heartbreak, a void that could never be filled, a pain that never truly healed. Thus jealousy had done its worst, and all that was left was a sorrowful lesson etched into the hearts of those who remembered two sisters in a modest village, and how envy had destroyed them both. The most important lesson in this story is that jealousy does not take away another person's blessings. It only destroys the heart that carries it, leaving behind pain, regret, and emptiness. And with that, dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonder, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, share, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.